Welcome to Echoes, the show where we listen to the stories that linger long after the headlines have faded. I'm Ron, and today we're exploring a case that is as heartbreaking as it is chilling. It's a story about family, betrayal, and a young woman's search for freedom. And this all began in December of 1998. A 27-year-old mother of two, a custom officer from London, travels to India for a series of family weddings. She's excited and hopeful, but she never comes home. And her family is told she ran away with another man and abandoning her children. For years, that is the official story, but it was a lie. A lie designed to cover up a terrible secret. And this is the story of Surjit Athwal and the search for the truth about what really happened to her. To understand this story, you have to understand Surjit. Friends and her own family describe Surjit as a happy, vibrant person who is full of life. She was born in England to a Sikh family, and she was by all accounts a Western girl. But at just 16 years old, her life took a turn she didn't choose. She was entered into an arranged marriage with a man named Surjit Athwal, who was 10 years older than Surjit. Almost immediately, the marriage was a difficult one, because Surjit moved in with her new husband and his family, which was ruled by a powerful and controlling matriarch, which is her mother-in-law Bachan Kaur Athwal. Now, imagine being 16 in a new home with a husband you barely know and a mother-in-law who watches your every move. Yeah. And the Athwal family was deeply traditional, and Bachan Kaur expected Surjit to conform with the rules and regulations of her household. But Surjit had a spark of independence. She wanted more than just the life that was prescribed for her by her in-laws. So she got a job she loved as a custom officer at Heathrow Airport in London. She started wearing more Western clothes, making friends and building a small life for herself outside the suffocating walls of her in-laws' home. Most significantly, Surjit had two children, a boy and a girl whom she adored. But her own happiness was slipping away, because her diary, which would later become key part of the story, were filled with entries detailing her misery and abuse she suffers within her marriage, which led Surjit to begin an affair with a colleague at a Heathrow Airport. That is when Surjit finally decided that, she's had enough and wanted a divorce from her abusive husband and his family. Now, for many of us, divorce is difficult, but it's a normal part of life. But in the eyes of her mother-in-law, Bachan Kaur, it was the ultimate act of dishonor. A divorce would bring shame upon the Athwal family name, and that was something Bachan Kaur would never allow in her lifetime. This is where the story takes a dark and calculated turn. Because in late 1998, Bachan, Surjit's mother-in-law, announced, they will be traveling to India for several weddings. And Bachan Kaur deceptively approached Surjit with a surprising offer. She told Surjit, come with me to India, attend the weddings, show your face, and when we return, we will grant you the divorce you want and you will be a free woman. For Surjit, this must have felt like a breakthrough, the light at the very long end of her tunnel. So she agreed. She told her colleagues at work she was going to India for holiday. She packed her bags, likely dreaming of a new life that awaited her upon her return. But what if that promise she was told by Bachan Kaur was a lie? What if the trip wasn't for celebration but for something else entirely? Yeah, that is what it was. This was a fatal trap, because the family had already decided to get rid of Surjit to prevent the perceived dishonor for divorce. So Surjit and her mother-in-law, Bachan Kaur, flew to India in December of 1998, and a few weeks later, Bachan Kaur returned to the UK, but alone. And when asked where Surjit was, she had a story ready, because Bachan Kaur claimed that Surjit, her daughter-in-law, and the mother of her grandchildren had run away with a man in India, and that Surjit had abandoned her family and she had brought shame on them all. For Surjit's own family, Surjit's mother, father, and siblings, this made no sense at all. Because Surjit would never abandon her children, and they knew something was terribly wrong, so they reported, Surjit missing, but investigation hit a wall of silence because they had no, proof or nothing to accuse the Athwal family family, because the Athwal family, were sticking to the story about, Surjit running away with a man in India. So for years, it seemed like they would get away with the crime, So Bachan was comfortable with what she did because Surjit's body had not been found and no witnesses were talking. So in the year 2000, Bachan Kaur and her son Sukhdev were even arrested on suspicion of conspiracy to murder. But here's the thing, with no concrete evidence, they were released. So the case went cold and Surjit Kaur Athwal was just another missing person. But behind the scenes, inside the Athwal family home, one person knew the truth and she was living in a constant state of fear. And that person was Surjit Athwal, and she was married to Surjit's brother-in-law. She was there and she had been in the room when the plan was hatched to kill Surjit. So for years, Surjit was silenced by threats. She was told that if she ever spoke, the same thing that happened to Surjit will happen to her. So she lived in a constant climate of fear, as she would later describe it. But the stress of this terrible secret took its toll on Surjit because she developed a life-threatening illness. And facing her own mortality, Surjit made a decision that would change everything. She decided she could no longer protect the guilty and she had to get justice for her sister-in-law, Surjit. So in the year 2004, Surjit walked into a police station. She started to talk. She told the police about a chilling family meeting that took place in their West London home before the trip to India for the wedding. She described how her mother-in-law Bachan Kaur sat on the floor and declared that Surjit was causing too many problems for the family, and so Surjit told the court that Bachan had said point blank they were going to get rid of Surjit, and this was the breakthrough investigated had been waiting for. And Surjit's testimony was the key that unlocked the entire conspiracy. So in the year 2007, 7 years after Surjit's disappearance, Bachan Kaur Athwal, now 70 years old, and her son Sukhdev Athwal stood trial at the Old Bailey Court in London. And the prosecution laid out, the cold and calculated plot that this wasn't a crime of passion, this was a premeditated murder, an honor killing designed to erase a woman who dared to ask for her own freedom. The court heard how Surjit was lured to India, drugged and then strangled, and her body dumped into the Ravi River in India, never to be seen again. The defense, however, tried to discredit Surjit, pointing her as a liar, but the jury saw through it all and they saw the quiet courage of a woman who risked her own life to tell the truth. After a 13-week trial, the verdict came in. Both Bachan Kaur and her son Sukhdev were found guilty of the murder of Surjit Kaur Athwal, and the judge called it a heinous crime characterized by great wickedness. Bachan Kaur, the family matriarch who ordered the death of her daughter-in-law Surjit, was sentenced to life in prison, becoming one of the oldest women in British history to receive such a sentence. Her son, Surjit's husband Sukhdev, was also given a life sentence, and this was a landmark case because it was the first time a British court had convicted someone of an honor killing that was planned in the UK but carried out in another country. So justice, it seemed, had finally been served. But is the story really over? Because echoes of this case are still felt today. While the masterminds were jailed in the UK, the men who physically carried out the murder in India had never been brought to justice. For Surjit's family, this remains an open wound and the failure of the Indian justice system. And there was another twist, because in 2022, after serving 15 years in prison, Bachan Kaur Athwal was released from prison on supervision, and the news was a blow to the Surjit's family, who felt her sentence was not enough for orchestrating such a cruel and calculated crime. The story of Surjit Kaur Athwal is a tragedy. It's the story of a vibrant young woman who was murdered by her own family for wanting a life of her own. But it's also a story of incredible courage, the courage of Surjit Athwal, who broke the wall of silence, and the enduring courage of Surjit's own family, who never stopped fighting for her. Her body was never found, but her story was, and it serves as a powerful, chilling reminder that the word honor can be twisted to justify the most dishonorable acts imaginable. Surjit wasn't a source of shame. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend, and a loving mother whose only crime was to dream of being free. Thank you for listening to Echoes. Join us next time as we uncover another story that deserves to be heard, and subscribe to the channel.